Welcome to Valente Brothers TV once again from our beautiful headquarters in North Miami Beach. We're going to continue talking about the Jiu-Jitsu history in our second episode. Today we're going to talk about the influence of the samurai warrior in our art and the etymology of the word Jiu-Jitsu. So should we start with the samurai?
Yes, the samurai warriors are responsible for the art of Jiu-Jitsu, for the organization of Jiu-Jitsu as a martial art. In fact, in the beginning, the samurai warriors, their main weapon was the sword. And the sword was used in the battlefield. But sometimes they would lose their sword, so there would have to be a technique that complemented the sword so that they could fight even without the sword. Now, different schools and different clans use different names for the arts. There were a series of different names being used. Later, with the organization of all the arts of the samurai, that happened in the 19th century. It was called Bugei Juhapan, when they organized the Bugei Juhapan. It's the organization of the 18 arts of the Japanese samurai. Kenjitsu, the art of the sword, Suijitsu, combat in the water, Bajitsu, horsemanship. And one of them was called Jiu-Jitsu, which was the martial art, the art of fighting without weapons. And they gave the name of Jiu-Jitsu to describe that collection of arts that were practiced under different names. So that's why the name Jiu-Jitsu became a name that was used for all the empty hand systems used by the samurai, even though they were different in nature and they were focusing on different elements depending on the time that they were practiced.
Should we also talk about how the periods, the eras in Japan also played a huge role in the development of the Jiu-Jitsu we practice today?
Yes, that's very important because in the beginning, Jiu-Jitsu really is born at the time when Japan was going through very, very violent civil wars. They were really fighting between themselves in Japan. And during that time, Jiu-Jitsu was focused on techniques for the battlefield where they were wearing their armor, and also the sword was involved and other weapons. So Jiu-Jitsu was practiced for that purpose. In the beginning of the 17th century, peace came upon Japan with the introduction of the shogun, the Edo period. And at that time, the reason for the practice of Jiu-Jitsu changed. And
what was the name of the shogun? Ieyasu?
The first one was Ieyasu Tokugawa. Some people also refer to this period as the Tokugawa era. And Tokugawa was able to unify Japan. And so during that time, Jiu-Jitsu starts changing from a battlefield art to a civilian art, where the samurai warriors were using it for civilian purposes, self-defense situations, and also more law enforcement style techniques.
We could spend an hour, 2 hours discussing these periods, but I think this gives our students a great starting point.
Yes.
To be able to research on their own, and eventually we also want to make this more available.
And it's important to say that during that time, Chinese philosophy was very prevalent in Japan. And so they studied the different philosophical books, the classical texts of Chinese philosophy, one of them being the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And that book had a very big influence on Jiu-Jitsu. The idea that to overcome strength, you don't want to resist it, but you want to yield, you want to use it to your advantage. In fact, the art of Jiu-Jitsu, the word Jiu-Jitsu is based on that, the idea of yielding and using your opponent's strength to your advantage.
So let me ask a question now. Is it fair to say that just like Chinese philosophy had a huge influence in the history of Jiu-Jitsu, in the development of Jiu-Jitsu, is it fair to say that Indian philosophy had some influence in Chinese society and Chinese philosophy?
In Chinese society, for sure, through Buddhism.
Okay, let's continue.
Yes.
Just wanted to throw that. If you haven't watched our first episode, go back and make sure you watch the first episode.
Yes, so the point is that if you look at the etymology of the word Jiu-Jitsu, Jiu means yielding flexibility. Jitsu means art.
A lot of students and friends ask why we changed the word from JIU to JU, and then from JITSU to JUTSU.
Because these are Japanese characters, and we wanted to be true to their proper transliteration, right? The transfer from the kanji characters, the Chinese characters which are used in Japan, to our alphabet. So the proper way, according to the Hepburn method, is Ju, which means yielding flexibility, and Jutsu, Jutsu, which means art. Because the samurai warriors, they had several different arts, as we mentioned. The 18 arts, Bugei Juhapan, was an organization that was created in the beginning of the 19th century to organize all of the Japanese martial arts that were practiced in Japan. And many of those were jitsu, sui jitsu for swimming, ba jitsu for horsemanship.
So what's Ju? Let's demonstrate. Why is it so important to have the correct spelling?
Because if you don't have the correct spelling, you don't even know what it means. So if you push me as hard as you can and I resist, that's the opposite of Ju. But if somehow I can take that and use it to my advantage, then that's Ju.
And for us, that is so important.
Correct.
And when we learned the right spelling, and also I believe, and this is something that we've had many discussions, not only amongst ourselves, but even with some of our dear friends. I believe that if Hélio Gracie was alive today and he had this understanding, I think he would be the first one to want to embrace this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because he was someone who appreciated precision.
Precision, yes.
And
so JIU, we use it as well still.
Sure, and
we respect it.
Absolutely, because it's been used already for over 100 years.
It's been established, but it's still a mistake.
Yeah, because if you separate the characters, because in fact you have two concepts, two characters, and if you separate them, they mean nothing. JIU means nothing in Japanese, and Jitsu, JITSU, actually means something else. It means truth, honesty. It does not mean art, and it's not the description of the different martial arts
recently
of
when
the
I was
samurai.
in Japan, talking to a cab driver, I even recorded it, remember?
Yes.
And when you said Jiu-Jitsu, it doesn't mean anything to a regular Japanese person. So
Correct.
I think that...
Yeah, the first character is present in Judo. You don't say Jiudo. You say
in some old books, it was written like that.
because it wasn't.
corrected.
Yeah, because it started with a mistake based on phonetics.
Yeah, and Judo, since Judo has always been connected to Japan, it was corrected. Jiu-Jitsu, for some reason, was not.
Yes.
So, good. So we talked about the samurai connection, very
Yes.
briefly, of course. Did we mention Meiji Restoration when you talked about the modernization of Japan?
Correct.
We recommend the movie. Of course, it's not historically super precise, but a movie that depicts
Yes.
that time in Japan is the last samurai.
Yes, and that's something we're going to talk about in the next episode: the modernization of jiu-jitsu and the migration to Europe and the United States.
Yes. So thank you so much, and we will see you very soon.
Thank you.